everyone, this is Deborah. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about some regrets that I have. And when I was a young mother, I was always tired. I never had anybody to help me. I had asked my mother-in-law at the time to come and maybe let me sleep for 2 hours when I lived in Chantilly, Virginia. And she didn't. That's when I knew she was a bitch. Yeah, she talked the whole time. I was so sleep deprived. I did not have a maid. My ex was working all the time. Now, he was really good with our kids when they were little and toddlers. When they became teenagers, no. He wanted no part of that. So, yeah, I was always tired. I hung my clothes out on the line. I didn't have a dryer back then. I didn't even have a dishwasher back then. Soon I got one, but I was always tired because I had to do the yard work, the shopping, the homework, you know, all the diapering, all that. Both of my kids were potty trained. My daughter was potty trained before she was even, I think, 18 months. My sons take a little bit longer, but I bribed him with a little bag of candy if he did go, and he did. So my kids were very intelligent. They didn't have electronics. They were outside playing every day. But I remember thinking how tired I am, and I always were fantasizing about what they're going to be like as teenagers. I wish I hadn't have done that. But I once asked my own mother what was the best part of her life, and she said when we all were little. Now, when I got married, she had just had a baby, which is my little sister. My little sister was 2 when I got married, and she was the one who carried my train. My brother was 8. So my mother still had 4 children at home. My sister Bonnie, who passed, she was working, I think, for the Defense Department, or was it the CIA? I don't know. I'll have to ask one of her sons. But my mother, when she told me that, I realized, yeah, that was the best part. And I'll tell you why. Because sometimes when you don't have enough money, when you're starting out, that you have to get creative. And I remember we had $20 left over after we paid all of our bills, and we would go to Grumpy's Pizza. It's now, I think, called the Oaks and Lively, and we would go there, and we would have enough to get 2 beers and a big pizza and drinks for my children. So that was our treat. That's how tight money was in the early 70s. But I realize now that was the best times of my life, because everybody that I loved was under one roof, you know. And you only get so many summers with your children, because when they start going to school, you only see them maybe for a couple of hours in the evening. So you have to make that time count. I remember when I worked for Fairfax County Police, my mother had a fit. You can't go to work, you have children. I said, Mother, I got bills. But she actually called the police department and said I didn't want the position. I kid you not. She was so adamant about that. But she was right. You really need to stay at home, I think, until your kids go to kindergarten. That time is so very precious, and you will miss all that if you are working. But I did get to stay home for a little while with my children. And then I became a deputy sheriff. So I remember every day I was at work, I would just miss my children so much, you know, because that time will go by that fast. Yeah, your time, it goes by so fast, you can't hardly keep your kids in shoes, you know. But my kids had a wonderful childhood because I lived in Maradica, Virginia, and we lived in a neighborhood that was just a big old cul-de-sac. It's just one circle. So, and my kids always had their dog, and the cat would follow them. Casey Jean and Kit Kat would follow behind my children when they would go down to the water. And I remember I would take them to Heritage Point Pool. But I had to do all my chores. I had all my chores done by 11. Then we'd load up in the car and we would go swimming. But I also learned something very important, that when someone's drowning, you don't hear thrashing. You don't hear screaming. They just go under. And I didn't know that at the time. And there was a lifeguard on duty, and my daughter said she almost drowned. So take heed to this. Keep your eyes on your children at all times. When I had an in-ground swimming pool built at my last home with their dad, I taught them not to be afraid of the water, and I taught them to swim when they were really, really young. And it might be very noisy, and you're always busy, and you're constantly hearing the refrigerator open, But I taught my children to ask for a drink so that they wouldn't hurt themselves, because when I was like 4 years old, I opened the refrigerator too many times, and a glass buttermilk jar fell on my foot and severed it, really. So I've always taught my children to ask, and I would. But back then, they just drank out of the goddamn water hose, people. So, yeah, that is the best part of your life, even though it's the most hectic. And if you can, it'd be wonderful if you could have a job that you could do at home. Now there's so many possibilities. You can work in your house, on the computer, online for companies. And here's another thing. When your parents are still alive, that is the best time, because the holidays are there. I would go to my parents' house first and have a wonderful meal. My parents were Southern cooks. And then we would load up, and then we would drive to Manassas and go to my mother-in-law's. And we would stay there for 7 days, because we did not live around malls. And this was in Manassas. They had malls and they had movie theaters. So that was our treat for many, many years, to go to the movies. It was like a tradition. And then on New Year's was my time with him. We would go to Virginia Beach and get into an indoor swimming pool with a tanning bed. That was my treat. So don't let those years go by, because I blinked my eye and my grandchildren were grown, and my own children. It is a very precious time, and you have to teach them as much as you can. I was very open with my children about everything. They knew so much more than other children. Now, my mother did not do that. My mother never talked about sex or trials. And she never told me that she was having difficulty. We all knew it anyway. But yeah, I was very open with my children. A lot of parents aren't. I was hands-on. My children were never dirty. They never did without. When they would come home from school, they would take off their clothes and put on their play clothes. That's what you had to do back then. And they may have had 2 pairs, maybe 3 pairs of shoes, but when I was growing up, I only had 1 pair. But please know that those times when your children are little is the best times of your life. And now that I rarely see my daughter, I see my son every day, but it is glorious, I think, to have your children come and visit you. And these times, I know half of my relatives have their own children living with them, and they're in their 30s and 40s. To me, that lets people know that we're a good parent if they want to come back and live with you. I only have a couple rules here. Take off your shoes before you come in. Clean up after yourself. And what else? yeah, clean up after yourself. What else? I think there's a couple more rules. I forgot them. But yeah, oh, I taught my son, because him and I have a severe ADHD, not to move anything. If you move something, the other day I lost my little container that I bought that says filters, coffee filters on it. I don't know what the hell happened. Who would take that? Well, I found it the next day. Somebody had moved it into the dining room, but it caused an argument. When you have ADHD or you have OCD, you need to know, I need to know where every tool I own is at, where everything is at, because if I have to waste time to go and look, okay, where did they put it? It is very aggravating. Yeah. I remember when I was growing up, my father never had a screwdriver, and that used to bug the crap out of me. We always had to use a butter knife. My father didn't even have a toolbox for our house. Well, that's like the first thing I've ever bought when I became an adult. So thanks for listening. Bye.